Okay, ladies and gentlemen, last day we were talking about the formula y equals mx plus b. Let's just do a quick pause and a refresher. I know you did this in physics, but I just want to make sure. What does the m represent? Slope. Fabulous. Slope is rise over run. It's an m because s's look like 5s. Why they chose m after that, could not tell you. B is what? Y-intercept. The y-intercept. Thanks, Cynthia. That was real good. Okay. The first question here. So we're going to start like really interpreting this. This unit has a lot of things that we kind of just expect you to know. So for example, this first question says the equation of a line, excuse me, passing through the point 0 and 2. X coordinate is 0. So that tells us right away that this is actually our y-intercept. So they are sneaky and told you your y-intercept without being like incredibly direct. When you're doing this unit, I strongly suggest like putting those kind of comments down as soon as you read it, because you're likely to forget. If you want to be lazier, you could put a B beside this. I would like circle the B or something to emphasize that it's a B and not a 6, because some of your B's really look like 6s. And our slope is 5 over 2. So our equation, all you do is replace m with 5 over 2. X hangs out plus 2. That's your full answer. This is a level 1.
Oh dear.
Okay. It's a level 1. You're replacing 2 blanks, guys. Come on.
That should be a 4.
At least a 6. At least a 3. Yeah, I
Okay.
think 3 is
Yeah.
Okay, children. So we have a graph. I'm just going to darken my axes. I find the axes aren't very dark. So each line on the grid passes through points with integer coordinates. What does that tell us, the integer coordinates piece? They're whole numbers. That's really important to be like, if you're like, oh, this doesn't look right, you're probably thinking about it wrong or approaching it wrong. We're looking for a whole number. In each case, state the slope and y-intercept and determine the equation of the line. So line 1 is like the bottom line. It says L1 really kind of low and quietly. With questions like this, there's a few ways you can approach it. I'm going to tell you what I think is the easiest, but really you could do it either way. So line 1, where does it cross on our y-axis? Like literally, what's the coordinate? Look at your papers in front of you. Count. -4. So our b value is at -4. From there, all you have to do is count for your slope. You could use your equation and actually do the subtracting, like write out 2 coordinates and subtract it. If the grid's given to you, I think it's way easier to count. When you're just counting though, pick 2 points that are perfect points, so that cross like perfectly on the grid lines. So easily, your y-intercept is always going to be one of those. They're going to make sure of that for you, because otherwise it's way too difficult to look at the graph and determine it. So let's use that as one of our points. I'm going to use this point over here. Could you use a different one? Totally. You can use any 2 points your heart desires, but just pick them as easy points. Then count. So remember, when you count to the right, it's positive. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I went to the right 6, so my run is 6. And I go up 2, so my rise is 2. So when we go back, our slope is our rise over our run. So we rose up 2 and we ran 6. You always reduce that, so I get 1/3. Then I'm just plugging that into our equation. So then y is equal to 1/3 x minus 4. If you use 2 different points to calculate your slope, you might get like a larger number there, but it'll still reduce down to 1/3. I want you to try and do line 2 on your own. So it's the exact same process, but for line 2. So try that one on your own. Really important when you're counting. If you count to the left, it's a negative. If you count down, it's a negative. So this one, we cross our y-intercept at +2. My slope is going to be 3 over 2. One of them is negative. It's going to depend on how you counted. I personally, for whatever reason, almost always do the horizontal first. So in this case, for me, it was -2. However, when you combine this to make your final equation, I would write it with like your negative just out front. That is personal preference. It doesn't actually matter where that negative goes. Like you could put the negative with the 3, with the 2, or out front. Doesn't matter. It all means the same thing. Were you guys able to do that one? Often if you get these ones wrong, it's just because you struggled to count. If like on your test, you drew it out like how I've drawn out like my counting here, and it's just clear you miscounted because it's a grid and sometimes we count wonky, I would probably still give you credit. Because you're understanding the process, you're understanding the math, you just like made a little error counting, and I get that sometimes the grids are kind of printed funny. Was that one okay? This is true. Okay, let's look at these next ones. So again, this is where it's coming in multiple concepts. So determine the equation of the line. We want a line that's parallel. What does parallel mean when we're talking about slope? Good, they're the same slope. So beside this, I would write same slope. In grade 10, whenever we talk about parallel or perpendicular, it's reference to slope. And it has the same y-intercept as this line. So we want to come up with a third line given 2. So really what it's saying is if I have this graph, line 1 has a slope like this, let's say. Line 2 is going to be steeper and it crosses down here. We are finding a third line that has the same slope as the first one, but crosses my y-intercept at the second one. So really we're finding this green slope, this green line's equation. Drawing a quick little sketch like that on these questions can actually be really helpful if you're like, oh, this is a lot of information. I don't even know where to start. So it has the same slope as that first blue line. So what is the slope of my first line? Good. So our new equation of our green one has a slope of 1/3. It's the same y-intercept as my red graph, which is at -7. So then like my line 3, or my green one, is 1/3 x minus 7. Sorry, my negative didn't click. Those sketches are really fast, right? Like that's very much an approximation, but it can help sometimes to like organize your thoughts because there's a lot going on. Oops. This next question's a little bit trickier. So we have a line passing through 0, 9. 0, 9 is my? Good, my y-intercept. It's perpendicular, so that means it's a negative reciprocal to this other line that joins those 2 points. So our first step here, let's figure out that negative reciprocal. Well, to do that, we need to know what our original first slope was. So we have to use our slope formula. You don't have to write your general formula down here. Like I'm not going to take away marks for not writing formulas. Sometimes it's just helpful to have it. I always suggest writing your coordinates down vertically because that's how they have to match up. So I get -6 and 2 minus 0 and -5. -6 minus 0 is -6. 2 minus -5. I'm subtracting a negative, so that gives me 7. So that was like our original slope. What's a slope that's perpendicular to that? Close. So we reciprocate it, so I get 7/6, and then we change our sign, so it becomes a positive slope. So our new graph has a positive slope of 7/6, and it passes through the point 0.09, so that's our y-intercept already. So overall, we get 7/6x plus 9. That little question seems really simple and like not super intimidating. There's a lot of information there though, right? There's like actually requires quite a bit of knowledge to answer that one. Turn the page. This unit, we are letting you have your calculators during practice if you would like. Our unit test is going to be calculator free. That being said, all of your numbers will be nice, pretty numbers to make your life easier. There could be questions like this one that have reference to your calculator, but you actually don't require a calculator at all to solve this, as well as using your calculator would not be beneficial anyways here. So the diagram shows you your display of your graphing calculator. The intercepts are integers. That means they're perfect, nice, whole numbers. Determine the equation of the line shown. So you have to be able to interpret what's happening here. So key pieces of information. X minimum is -5. So what that means is this point right here is at -5. X maximum tells us that this point over here is 30. Then it tells us our scale is 5. So each tick otherwise along our scale is 5. I would actually draw this out and label it because I think that's going to be really helpful. So 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25. Then it tells us our y scale. So our y down here is at -5. For whatever reason, they went up by 7 here. So that's wonky. Our maximum up here is at 20. What that tells us is our spacing is a little bit weird. There's a tick. You can kind of see it right here. We know that that's at 7 then because there's a tick. We know our points where it crosses are also whole numbers. So that means this one is at 14 because they're not going to mess with you and make it like 15, which is just kind of like mean and weird. And I don't love that they made it go up by 7, but that's what it's getting at. So we know from here that our y-intercept, our b value, is at 14. We know our x-intercept is at 20. So what that does mean is we can actually calculate our slope using our slope formula because we actually do have 2 data points then. Sneaky way to give you those 2 data points, but it gives them to you. So I could do them in either order. So let's do 14 and 0, then 0 and 20. So I get 14 over -20, which reduces to -7 over 10. So now I have my slope, I have my intercept, I can plug them into my equation, and life is happy. So I get -7/10 x plus 14. How was that one? That's okay? Incredibly dry and boring. You guys look so enthused by this. Okay, almost done. Now we're just going to talk about horizontal and vertical lines and how you define them. So a horizontal line, going back to like my ski analogy, you're up at the top of your ski lift and you're buckling your boots back into your board. What's our feelings and our emotions right then? 0. We're excited when we go up the chair. I gotta work on my analogy. But you're excited when you're going up the chairlift because you're about to start skiing. You're kind of like, your emotions go down a little bit to 0 when you're buckling them in because it's really annoying. So I say there's 0 then. So horizontal slope is at 0. You're terrified as you're skiing, and then you fall in a tree well. So horizontal slope. So we're first looking at line 1. I'll highlight it so you guys can see it a little bit better. Line 1 is right there. Our slope on line 1 is 0. I have no rise. So I'm going to have 0 divided by one number. Doesn't matter what that number is because it's still going to give us 0. It crosses our y-axis at what coordinate? Positive 4. Thank you. So b is equal to 4. So when I plug that in to get our equation, I'm going to get y equals 0x plus 4. Anything times 0 is what? 0. So that equation we would actually say is just y equals 4. Pause for a second and think about it. Every single data point on this line has an x coordinate, like this point here would be -7 and 4, -1 and 4, 1 and 4, right? Every x value changes, but the y is consistently at 4. So that's why your equation is just y equals 4. That same logic then can be for the second line, this one down here. That one crosses at -6. So that equation is just going to be y equals -6. What are the slopes of a vertical line? Undefined. So really careful, grade 10s. Remember, it's undefined. It's not 0. You can be lazy if you want and write D and E. What would that stand for? N is for not. Does not exist. Slightly easier. So our slope is undefined. What is there a y-intercept? No. So our y-intercept, you need to actually say like no y-intercept. You can't say the y-intercept is 0 because that implies it crosses at 0. So your answer there is literally there is no y-intercept. So as a result, I can't replace m with something, and I can't replace b with something. So the way you describe a vertical value is by saying, in this case, it's going to be x is equal to -3. Because every single x point on here is at -3, right? Like this would be -3 and 0. -3, -1. What is that? -3 and -9. Right? Like they all have that common x to each other. So we describe a vertical line as just x equals then whatever the coordinate of that x is. That's something that you kind of just want to memorize. It won't come up that often realistically, but it's a piece of information to know. Turn the page. 2 last questions. Determine the equation of line that goes through that point. And then we have 2 parts to this. I would do a quick little sketch here, help you visualize what's actually happening. So I'm going to draw my little Cartesian plane. -2 and 8. So 2 to the left and up 8. I have a point right here that we're kind of caring about. A line that's parallel to the y-axis. Show me with your arms. Is it a vertical or horizontal if it's parallel to the y-axis? Good. So we're going to get a vertical line going through that point. Parallel to y-axis. How do we describe vertical lines? Our slope is undefined, you're right. So then we use x is going to be equal to, in this case, -2. Because all of those points on that red line are at -2 for x. If it's parallel to the x-axis then, and going through that point, I get this nice horizontal line. The thing that's common here, my slope is 0. So then I'm going to have y equals 8. If you wanted to write out y equals 0x plus 8, because that's how like your brain works better, That's just fine. How was that? Fabulous. Okay, it's 3 o'clock. You have 35 minutes. These are the practice questions. It seems like a lot, but it's just how I kind of wrote it. For the first one, you're picking 4 of them. For question number 2, you only have to do it once. Like they drew out 3 lines for you. You only have to do 1 line. And then first thing Monday morning, we're having a quiz because I'm delightful like that for you. As long as you have done your homework up until this point, you would be, and understand it, you'll be prepared. Like you shouldn't have to do additional studying. Okay? So like don't stress about this. I just want to check in after this. Our unit kind of changes, and I just really need to make sure you understand these concepts because otherwise it gets substantially harder. So that's why I'm doing a quiz. Okay? That's all. So you have 35 minutes to work on those.